Hey, my new YouTube friends, this is Dan Huff, The Experience. Of course, you know that if you're tuning in, but I do have something to add about that. I just thought about it today on the way over here. You know how it says, The Experience with Dan Huff? It's feeling like it's presumptuous because it's like, it's not the experience, it's an experience, but an experience with Dan Huff, I don't like that either. So maybe lowercase the experience, right? That feels better. Just one of many experiences. You guys are here, but you're curious about mine, so here we go. I'm sorry I missed you last week. I posted as the only thing I know how to do on Instagram. My excuse was solid. I really wanted to go see one of my grandkids that lives up in the mountains, and he was down in Florida, close enough for me to drive to see him. So anyway, that was last week. I'm back with you this week. Robert Baker, my dear friend, curator, guy with the whip, saying, "Come on, Dan, let's get in here and do this." That's him in the back. You can hear him. He'll move and he'll grunt and he'll throw out some questions. But he said, "Dan, look, we've done a bunch of guitar things. We can't just keep putting out guitar solos. You know how you did a giant solo and stuff like that." And I agree. I do appreciate a lot of you that have said that you enjoy these videos, and we got another one in the can that we're going to put out, and we'll do more. But I've had a lot of requests over the last couple of weeks since I've started this YouTube channel, and people asking about my day job. So, and I guess a lot of you would know what I'm referring to. It's I'm a record producer, right? You know, it's something I never would have thought a million years ago that I would never ever. I'm gonna start that again. Something, and you don't have to edit this out. I think this is just the way I talk, right? When I was a kid growing up, it was guitar, guitar, guitar. When I was playing sessions, guitar, guitar, guitar. Producers were the guys who hired me, and basically, you know, I got to pay my apartment rent, and you know, I started having kids, and then you know, mortgages and all that kind of stuff. So producers were great. They were in my life, and if I pleased the producers, I was going to be in my job as a studio guitar player. But somewhere along the line, I'll be more specific in a minute. It's significant, some of the people who encouraged me to put on a different hat from being a session player. I found myself in the early 2000s producing records, and really the currency of a successful producer, or somebody who's going to be able to make a living producing records, is somebody who has hits, right? It sounds like that SNL thing that, you know, the more cowbell. What was the guy's name? Bruce, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember that. Anyway, so it sounds so cliche, but that's the truth. As a guitar player, when I play a session, as long as the artist and the producer loved what I did, that was the currency for getting called the next day. And it was up to them to have hits and, you know, tour and all that kind of stuff. My job was just to make sure they had the guitar parts that they needed to make the records happen. When you put on a producer's hat, it doesn't matter how good the record is that you make, or whatever, how good you feel it is, or even how other artists, producers, musicians think it is. If it doesn't do that one thing, which is generate money, income, right? You're not going to be producing long. That's the sad part about it. Now, and I've been lucky from that standpoint, I will say that. And I mean, I'm not going to talk about my credits or anything like that. If you want to know people I've worked with, you can, that's what Google is for. So, but it has been a wonderful, I'd say 25 years of being able to produce a lot of records. I will say this, before I get into the main subject matter, I like baseball analogies. If you hit, 300, 310, 320 lifetime, the major leagues, you're in the Hall of Fame. You turn that around, let's just say 300, right? My math is pretty remedial. If you hit 300, right, that's 3 out of 10, 300 out of 1,000, 30 out of 100. The inverse of that is you're actually hitting negative 700. So you're in the Hall of Fame if 3 out of the 10, every time you get up to bat, you get on base. 7 out of the 10, it's taken for granted. You're getting out. You're striking out, grounding out, flying out, whatever. So that's kind of like it is with producing. I have some big records, about 300, right? Most of the stuff that I do, a lot of producers, flops. That's just the nature of the gig. Anyway, that's enough of the backdrop for that. Do I have any more house cleaning to do? I got a gig in Nashville, December 17th. I'll just plug that out there. It's my reunion farewell tour all in one night. So who knows? I'll probably do some more. I mean, if people enjoy this, if I enjoy, I think I'm going to enjoy the heck out of it, because the band I have, by the way, is the same band that played on my record. So I am so freaking lucky. Other than Eric Darkin, the percussionist, he could not make it. He had a gig that night, and I would love to have him, because he's such a great musician. So maybe that's enough impetus to do another gig down the line. But everybody else is in the band that played. Also, I need a rhythm guitar player, because the way I compose these songs, they all started from a rhythm guitar part. So there would be a big empty space if I didn't. And my dear friend Mark Oakley, who used to tour with us when we had our band Giant, for that minuscule second at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, he offered to come and play rhythm guitar. So it's going to be a really nice reunion. And then just to throw one other little carrot in it, if you care, if you like, a bunch of you, the reason I'm saying it is because you've been kind about some of the Giant stuff. My wife said, look, Dan, it's great that you're going to play instrumental music, but people want to hear somebody sing. And I was like, where is this going? She said, you should do 2 or 3 Giant tunes, just for the heck of it. And I thought about it. I thought, that's a good idea, Sherry. So I'm going to do that. And she said, you should sing it. And what? No, I'm not going to sing it. Anyway, we negotiate. This is the way we do it. She basically just beats the hell out of me until I finally say yes to her. I'm going to sing the verses in one song, so that's about as much as I'm doing. And to that point, I know so many of you have said so many nice things about my singing, and why don't I sing? It was never my passion. So, and you don't use those muscles; they atrophy a bit. So my singing is not great. I can just tell you that. I don't even want to hear it. I will do a couple lines. So that being said, I have some guests coming in to sing. I'm excited. I'm not going to tell you who those are. And I have some guest guitar players coming. So there's going to be a lot of collaboration. All the people that played on the record are going to be here. So that's that. And if you're in Nashville, December 17th, I think the tickets went on sale actually today. So there is, there's some, I guess they sell, 350, 400 tickets or something like that. So hopefully there'll be a lot of people there. And that's the end of that. As a result of everybody that has written me and said, we'd like to know more about your production, I'm going to just start with an overview today. And I'm going to go into, over the next several months, I want to do a series also about guitar players that I work with in Nashville. And then I'm going to extend it to some of my guitar player friends and buddies out in the West Coast. But I'm going to start here at home base, because we have so many just monster guitar players, and these guys feed me. I mean, it's like I hire them, they play on my records, and I'm all the time going out and saying, what do you got on your pedal board? What amp? Why don't I have that tone? That's going to be the discussions, and there's some great ones. So I'm excited about that. That'll kind of emanate from the production. I've also been asked, can I drag a camera in when I'm producing records? And the short answer to that is probably not, because it's not. I'm not the artist. If I was recording me, yeah, I would do that. But I produce other artists, and their privacy, their content. You get the idea. So I'm going to talk about it, and we'll see how this conversation goes. If something comes out of it, and I need to get more detail, I'm all in. Robert always has the green light to ask questions. So I'm going to start with just kind of the arc of my career, which many of you know started as a studio guitar player in my early 20s. I started in Nashville playing demos, played on some master recordings, but immediately had the opportunity to move out to the West Coast. And that was the epicenter of what I was interested in at that time. It was rock and pop music, R&B music. I knew nothing about country music. So what is the irony that I end up in Nashville producing a lot of country acts? I'll leave that to you to answer that question. I can't answer it. So anyway, I'm a kid. I'm out in the West Coast having the time of my life, getting to play for all these people that I a year before was reading about, or looking at on Billboard chart magazine or whatever, and getting to play with musicians who I revered. So this was going to be my life. This is what I was going to do. And fast forward about 7, 8 years, 9 years, I was doing it so much that, like any kid, I got bored. And so wrote some songs. I'm just going through this quickly. It didn't happen just overnight. Wrote some songs, got signed to a record deal. We ended up having a band, having a couple, I'd call them minor hits, two, 3 really good records. I like the first one personally the best. I thought that was the most soulful. But did that. We moved to Nashville. Had my first kid. By the way, I'm representing her husband as a Arkansas. He's a native Arkansanian, and so Razorback Nation. There you go, Woo Pig, right? They're not my team, but I have to represent the whole family. So, end up back in Nashville. The band gets ceremoniously dropped because the 90s were ushered in, and long hair melodic rock just wasn't the thing anymore. And so I have, I guess, Kurt Cobain and Eddie Vedder to thank, Dave Grohl to thank for that, because it deposited me in Nashville. And we decided to stay. I picked up my studio career, and the intersection of country music and rock music was dovetailing at that time in the 90s. So I got a free pass to play on, I don't know how many records. It was exceptional, the amount. On my terms musically, how will I describe that? They weren't interested, the producers, the artists were not interested in me trying to play Brent Mason licks, right? They could get Brent Mason, and none of us could replicate that anyway. So it was the idea, we want these other shades, these other colors in our music, and it was the perfect time. So all of a sudden I'm playing, in essence, a lot of the stuff that I had played in the 80s on country records. Found my new home, again, it's session. And somewhere in there, I think this is in the 90s, I'm going to use one more analogy, and just because it's easier to explain some of these things in these terms. Session player, I would liken to, a contractor. If you're building a house, you're going to call the guys who put the studs in, who frame the house. You're going to call the drywall people. You're going to go through each area of the house. You're going to call the electrical. You're going to call it plumbing. And these are all contractors, right? And you have a general contractor that keeps track of this and kind of is the coach of the whole thing. And so I spent pretty much 2 decades making records as a guitar player. And through that, I worked for so many of what I would say are some of the world's greatest record producers. So in essence, it was like I was getting paid to play, and I was going to school, and I didn't realize it at the same time. I got to be in the room, watch how these magnificently talented producers, some who were musicians, some who were not, made these records, how they inspired people. On the opposite side, I worked for some producers who were taskmasters, I would say that. I mean, and they were not nice to people. I learned what I didn't want to do from some people like that. I don't want to dwell on that too much, but I mean, you kind of see what works when somebody's trying to bring out the best in you, trying to describe what they want. They're building this proverbial house. Hey, we need you to do this as a guitar player. We need you as the bass player to do this, the drummer. The sounds, the communication, the description of shades, if in a song, what they're thinking, how they spoke to artists, how they let artists speak to the musicians, how we spoke amongst ourselves. You get the picture. It was like sitting front row and watching somebody like, I'm going to drop some names, right? Mutt Lange, there you go. I mean, masterclass. Watching how he started with a song and how he brought everyone to his vision of that song. And how he also was inclusive and made everybody feel like they were necessary physically, spiritually, philosophically on these songs, that he would just pull your essence out of you, get the best out of you. That was something that I was very interested in. And as a matter of fact, I mentioned a minute ago, he was one of the major reasons why I got into producing, because one day, I can't remember where we were sitting. I was probably playing guitar for him, and he said, you know, basically, hey, I was thinking about it. You have the makings for a producer. And it shocked me, and I asked him why, and he just said, you seem to understand more than just from where, you know, from your guitar perspective. And it was true. I think that's why I probably existed as long as I did as a studio player, because I didn't make it all about just my guitar playing. And we'll get into some of that in some of the session guitar playing talks, but I'll just leave that right now. And I think maybe, again, I don't think it was boredom, but just curiosity that heard him out. And I thought, you know what, you know, maybe I'll give it a shot. And of course, it doesn't hurt when you have somebody like Mutt Lange telling somebody else, hey, you should try this guitar player to produce your record. I mean, that kind of endorsement, you can't pay for that. So I was very fortunate in that. So anyway, that's my journey to that point in my career. And I wasn't going to stop playing guitar, but I thought, yeah, I can try to build some of these homes, you know, using my knowledge, my experience, what I've done for the past 20 years. And it turns out I had so much experience to draw from. I didn't even know the vast amount, but it would come up in a situational standpoint. You know, you get in the studio, said artist song, and you hit a kind of a dead end. And I've been a player in those situations, and it's hard to see when a producer doesn't have an idea either, or the artist doesn't. Everybody sits there and just, get really awkward. Some guys get a little nasty. It's like, come on, do something, play something I like. You know, the more you do that, the more everybody else is going to kind of choke too. So when I would work with Mutt, and it was in a tracking situation, it was like he never did that. He didn't say this, but it was like he was going to come, and if you were stuck, he was going to put you on his shoulder and drag you over the finish line. You know, he was not going to let you fail. And when somebody does that as a producer, all of a sudden you exhale. That was an inhale. You exhale. You're there for a reason. You have confidence, and all of a sudden your instincts kick in. Well, when I was producing, I would invariably get in situations, both good and bad, and seemingly, you know, dead ends. And all of a sudden, little things started coming back to me from what I had seen in all those years as a player. And so that was the beginning of me producing records. I was lucky because some of the first things I did, you know, they blew up. And so record companies thought I knew more than I was comfortable in saying that I knew. They just assumed that I knew, you know. Well, I wasn't going to tell them I didn't, but, you know, if you'd have been with me on the ride home talking to a friend or talking to Sherry on the way home, it's like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. It's just going by the seat of my pants. But it was just an extension of what I was doing as a session guitar player. I mean, you come in, you haven't heard this music, and you're either presented a chart, you're listening to a demo, whatever, you chart your own chart. And something that didn't even exist in your life, you're collaborating and making something new. And I just took that to the next level with producing. You're just dealing with people. And that's kind of the setting for how I got into it. It happened, it took off rather quickly. I'm going to refer to my note here for just a second, my notes, because I had some things I wanted to tell you. Producing is in its essence being a coach. You know, in any kind of coaching situation, you're going to have these once in a lifetime exceptional athletes, right? And then you're going to have the workhorses, you know, and you got to know how to coach everybody. You got a celeb, you know, there, you know, whatever, you know, in the NFL, you know who's who. Pick anybody. You're going to coach that person who maybe has been coddled a little bit more, or who's carrying a team, who's, you know, you can't coach them the same way you're going to coach some other players who are rookies who are coming up through. You need to know how to coach everybody. That's what producing is. If you really want to get into it and learn how to be effective over the course of many years. So that's what I started to do. It was interesting to me. Musically, at first it was interesting to me also because I was in a new town, and my experience as a musician was more in the rock genre, part of music, or R&B or pop. And so this whole country thing was kind of, I was very curious about it, especially like early on. I started working with Keith Urban, who was, just such a great musician. Australian, he didn't grow up here in Nashville like I did, but he knew more about country music than most people I knew at that time because of what he was exposed to by his parents when he was growing up. So I started getting involved in that. It was, a little bit more from a guitar standpoint, and it was a little bit more rock. So I felt at home-ish, enough to where I could feel comfortable and make music that felt like it was home to me, but I wasn't doing a repeat because that wasn't the drill here in Nashville. And there was another band too, or another artist that was a band at the same time that was having a lot of commercial success. It was Rascal Flatts. I don't know if any of you have heard of them. I'm sure a lot of you have, but those two artists, I would say that, and they weren't the only artists, but we did so many records paralleled for years and years. We all kind of came up through the system together, and we brought each other up, and I'm very grateful for being with all those guys. And maybe I'll talk about some of the other artists too, but those are just two easy ones because that was the early 2000s. So Robert and I were talking about this in terms of everything is going to be through the lens of guitar at the end of the day for me, because that's the way I view the world. Make kind of guitar records. But Robert brought up the idea of, how do you cast a band? This is a big thing in producing because, hopefully you're not a one-trick pony doing the same thing over and over again. And I realized that very early on. You could make a hit record, you can repeat it a little bit, but ultimately people are going to get tired of that sound, the same thing. It's like, pressing repeat and play. So one of the ways to make sure that doesn't happen, totally antithetical when I was a player. You wanted the producer, you wanted to get this relationship, and you wanted him to call you for every record that they did, right? So, talking out of both sides of my mouth, that's what I wanted as a player. As a producer, I intuitively knew that was going to limit me. And it was tough because, in these settings, we're all friends too, the studio musicians. You want to hire your friends, you'd love to hire them every time. But the problem is, if I'm making a record for this said artist, and I make the same record for this artist and for this artist, at some point somebody's going to go, well, this guy can only do one thing, so I'm going to have to find somebody to grow. So casting a band is, I think, one of the fundamental bedrock things. It's like casting a movie to be a producer. And it helps. I'm a musician, so I know the speak. I hang with most of these guys on the other side of the glass, playing with them. So I intuitively knew their strengths, their weaknesses. And, I will say that none of us know the depth of everybody. There's always a lot of surprises. I've been surprised by a lot of players who I would say, oh, you're this kind of player, and then to find out that they have this whole other side that I was never exposed to. So, but that being said, the job of a producer is an artist is going to come to me and say, I want you to help me make my record, or a record label is going to say, we want you to work with this artist. Meet with the artist. The main question, I say, what do you want to do? What do you want to make? And so we get in these conversations, and some artists are more musically inclined. Certainly Keith Urban, great musician, great guitar player. So we could talk in more specifics musically. Some artists, they're entertainers, they're singers, and they don't feel comfortable speaking theoretically in musical terms, or sometimes they don't even feel that they have the terminology to describe what they're talking about. My job is not to make them learn my language. My job is to learn their language. And, I make a joke. Look, if I got to learn, even if you grunt, I'm going to read your body language. I'm going to, because if we're sitting there and we're running something down in the studio and you're hunched over like this, if you're not telling me something, I'm going to guess that this is not hitting you in right solid in your heart what you wanted. So I'm going to say to you, what's not right about it? Some artists, as I said, can say, well, it's too fast, wrong key. I don't like what the guitar player is doing. I like the sound. But in many cases, you'll get an artist, and this doesn't diminish their ability to do what they do, but they don't have that confidence and that terminology. And so what they're looking to do is, as a producer, you are that liaison between their dreams, the financial aspect of a label funding it, what they expect as far as return. You're the conduit between all of these conversations, and then you're also trying to communicate with the musicians. I'm just going back here, as if there's glass and there are musicians back here. But that's the coaching. You got all these ingredients, and I'm trying to make sense of it. So I'm going to the artist, and I'm saying, look, if I see you smile or I see your shoulders go down, I'm going to assume that's starting to hit you in the right spot. Grunt. Say colors. I want it more green. I mean, we'll figure that out by a process of elimination. That's the first job. So going back a little bit, I'm talking with an artist. What kind of record do you want to make? Play me your songs. And then I'm going to say, this is pretty much what I ask most artists that I work with. I would say, do you have favorites? Who do you feel comfortable making music with? Because it's a very vulnerable thing to go in with demos, with something that is the core of your next project. And when it's in demo land, you're writing, you put your demos down on your laptop. There's always this idea that when it gets better, when we do it for real, it's going to be that kind of transformation, and it's going to be that transcendent articulation of what their dreams were. But when you get into a studio, usually it's abject fear, because all of a sudden there's no volume, like you're playing live, there's no hype to any of this stuff. It's so surgical, clinical in the studio because everything is mic'd. You can hear, you hear everything. That's the point. And it can be very daunting. So you get in there, and my first instinct is to say, what makes you comfortable as an artist? You got a drummer you like, you got a keyboard player, a guitar player. Who have you made music with that inspires you, that makes you feel comfortable, that maybe knows how to interpret some things that I wouldn't know? So we start there, and usually, they'll say back to me, yeah, but who, you're making these records, who should we get? And then the dialogue ensues, and we figure kind of the sound. We'll talk drums first. That's kind of the quarterback of the band. You got to have the right sounds, the right feel, and all the studio drummers, they can, like any good studio musician, they're going to be able to bridge and go between different kind of styles within their instrument. But usually everybody has that one super place of expertise where they shine. So if you could match the need of a song of an artist with somebody who exemplifies that thing, you're going to go to that first. Now, if it's kind of eclectic music, kind of all over the map, then you're going to want to find somebody who has a little bit of everything. Or you'd use multiple. I'm talking about drummers right now. You use multiple drummers. Again, it's so subjective. There's no right way to do this. There's no wrong way to do it. You're just figuring out how to bring something out of kind of midair. So we talk about drummers. Sound. What kind of you want a drummer that's a bulldozer. Somebody like that. You want a kind of a handsy player, plays 3/4 volume, light, kind of skirts tempos. Do you want somebody who's like uber tight? Do you want somebody who doesn't care about that? You can go into all those subsets of just even drumming, and then you go through it with each instrument. It can take a long time, or it can be really quick. A lot of times artists go, just you call it, Dann. And so I'll digest their music, and I want to listen. I listen mostly at first, and just FYI, in Nashville, historically, the producers, this is when I was coming up through the system, they're the ones who are bringing the songs. They meet with all the publishers, and here's what we're going to cut. I've never been that kind of producer. I think a lot of people thought otherwise, but I've always been more interested in what an artist writes or the songs that they reckon with. So I always am the last step in that process. I'll leave that at that. I mean, it's just, I hear songs and sometimes I will bring in songs, but it has to be a lot for me to do that. And I'm interested in an artist's vision. That's where I think I do my best work, when I collaborate, not when I'm dictating what something should be. That's just my style. So, and that's, there's other producers who are really effective who do it the other way. And like I said a minute ago, you don't even have to be a musician to be a really good producer. Just like you don't have to have played in the NFL to be an effective NFL coach. So you get the idea, I think. I got to ask Robert something. Am I talking too fast?
No.
Okay.
I don't think
so. Because I feel, all you guys out here are listening to this on a Sunday, right? I'm talking to you, but I'm looking at a lens and I can see my shirt and it's very distracting. And I'm getting excited, so I'm talking fast. So I'm going to take a cup of coffee and lighten this up. How's that? How's that for chintzy, huh?
I wish I had had a camera in my hand to do like a slow pan.
Actually, I really like this cup of coffee. Oh, what is it? Noodling is life.
Man, I wish I had one of those cups of coffee.
Oh. Hey, I have an idea. Maybe I should have my daughter deal with some of that stuff. Oh, actually, she already has.
Wait.
You guys are way ahead of me. This is something that I got to be honest. I'm going to pick up on the production side here in a minute. I just need a breath. There's no good way to go into this because it just makes me look like I'm a not a snake oil salesman, but you fill in the blank. Robert and my daughter Ashlyn, who did the opening, which I love. She's so creative. They said some things back to me that I've said on some episodes, and one of them was noodling is life, and I just thought that was, it's my life. I just noodle all the time, and all of you that are guitar players, you know what I'm talking about, right? We just can't shut up. And she found out a way to actually manufacture some T-shirts with that on it, and I think I wore one a couple weeks ago. So, and the idea is, if people were asking, which they have asked, I'm being serious now, we would make them available. They're really good T-shirts too. I don't know the company, but I like really comfortable T-shirts. So I can find out. There's going to be some available. She's going to do a pre-order on one. The Noodling is life, a couple different colors. I think, Robert, you'll put it in somewhere they can see it, right?
Yeah, I'll get with Ashlyn and do that, because she said she's had people emailing her asking
right
about it.
Yeah. Well, and then she took the ball and rolled with it, basically. There's one time, I guess I said, we were talking about the 80s on your podcast, Robert, and to me, it's just the audacity that you have 2 and 3 choruses at one time. And so the idea was mucho chorus everywhere but nowhere. So that's another shirt. We're doing those things. She's got hats, if you like that kind of stuff. It's if you want in on the fun. Trust me, where the rub is, I'm not doing this whole thing. I'm not doing this to become a YouTube dude and to make money. Truly, whether you believe me or not, I'm doing this because Robert grinded me down at some point. He said there would be people who'd be very interested in your experience. The rest of it, I love that part of it. I love sharing this. And I think it's better than maybe going to a university or something like that where most people aren't going to be interested. They're going to just want to get their class credit. You're coming here because maybe I'm saying something that you're interested in. So we'll share all that stuff with you too. I mean, well, you have to pay for the T-shirt, so I'm not that kind, I guess, right? But I do. So
that's my retirement plan. These T-shirts.
Yeah. Well, I got to pay Robert somehow because it's like there's that. So anyway, as you guys get interested, if you like that kind of stuff, it's going to be available, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I think that's all I'm going to say about it. So full of shit I am. To production, right? How are we doing on time, Robert? Where am I at in my?
You are at 2:30 right now.
No, I mean, how much time have I been talking?
You've been going.
I gotta know because I'm
38.
Okay, I'm gonna try to get this thing going in the next 20 minutes. Getting a band, right? The description of players, a lot of times for me, it's great because I've played with a lot of these guys. So it makes it really easy for me to at least feel confident when I say, I think this is the drummer. If the artist or, label, sometimes they weigh in too. If they're going to leave that up to me, and most people do. But then we go through bass players, same thing. There's all the nuances, I'm gonna, if you guys like this, which I'm assuming you will, I'm gonna bring some of these guys in. We're gonna start doing some of these interviews. I'm gonna do one. I was supposed to do one tonight with Tom Bukovac, but he had to bail just because something came in. We're gonna do it, and I'm excited because as far as somebody that asks questions, he is the premier god of question asking. He's always been that way. But we have a relationship where I started hiring him in the early 2000s, and he played on so many of the records that I was doing. So we have that part of our relationship. He's also coached me on doing a record and getting, doing this thing that I'm doing with you guys. So, but I'm going to ask him a lot of the questions that I'd like to know from his viewpoint when I was hiring him. Going into the guitar players, that's where it gets really fun for me, because there's so many tones and so many techniques that guitar players have, things that I just don't do naturally. And so the first thing I'm going to do is find guys who do what I can't do, or I just don't feel like I do it well. And I'm going to germ off them, or what's the equivalent? I'm going to nerd out, right? I'm going to nerd out on their equipment, on their ideas, and we speak guitar talk. So that's the most, I would say that's the most natural thing for me to do, and the easiest thing. The nice thing is, because I play, if I need to articulate something that I hear and I can't quite get somebody to do, I'd pick up a guitar and do it myself, So that's that. What I look for in a band, this is not a prerequisite, but I love hiring musicians that also have production experience. And the reason I say that is because they know how to read the room. They know it's not all about them. It's not all about just their instrument. There's a bigger picture to be had. Their job is to represent their instrument and do that part of the task of the day. But they have the overview. And probably that's me compensating for young Danny Huff when it was, I wasn't a jerk, but it was all about me when I was in my 20s. And the world was just one big place for me to play my guitar. The rest be damned. So maybe that's me not wanting, I don't know if I'd hire my younger self if I had a choice. That's the honest truth. I think I would just said, settle down, big guy. But I really tend to look for players who have that other gear. And if they don't have, because if they have production experience, they know what I'm going through at that moment. They know it can't be about any one thing. It has to be about the entirety, the whole of what we're doing. So that alleviates what? Their need to focus only on what they're doing and make it all about them. New York Yankees, right? Traditionally, and I don't have all the stats, but I just know that their modus operandi has always been hiring, spending the most, getting the biggest stars, and just getting everybody together. And we all know that, the greatest bands are not all-star bands. As a matter of fact, most of them aren't. It's about, there's a chemistry, right? And whenever they break up bands and they bring in a ringer, have you ever noticed it's never as good? I'm not going to name him because sort of politeness, but boy, it used to always piss me off when a lead singer would do a solo record. He'd work with studio players and realize how much easier it is, just from a time standpoint. So they fire their drummer or something like that, and they bring in a studio drummer, but it never is the same thing, because there's a camaraderie, a teamwork, there's a chemistry. That's what I look for in basically hiring a band. I want a chemistry. I want musicians that aren't afraid to step out, but that also aren't afraid to step back and realize that they don't have to carry every moment. As a matter of fact, if you want some diversity in a record, you don't want it hitting at the same intensity level from everybody all the time. So what I'm looking for, in essence, are people that play well with other people and do not have to be the center of attention. Guitar players, we tend to be like what wide receivers, alphas. We just are that way. And as a matter of fact, I'm really excited because I was talking with one of the guitar players that I've looked up to and also had the chance to work with, Brent Mason. I mentioned him earlier. And he and I are going to have a conversation about that, because if there's an alpha, he's an alpha, man, I'm just telling you. And I witnessed him. He can step into that shoes and slay you and make you weep. And he also has the ability to become almost invisible, a third guitar player, with the same absolute intensity towards what he's doing. I mean, I've seen him just play diamonds, right? If a producer wanted me, and I don't want to tip the whole discussion, but he was interested in having this discussion too, because it's something that if you're in the studio capacity, that you're going to run into this. I watched him do it. I witnessed it. So, and by extension, all these players that I tend to gravitate towards have that gear. And it's so important. And okay, I'm going to go down one more rabbit hole on this. Here's a discussion that always exists. Do a record here. And these artists usually, for the most part, sometimes members of the touring band will come in and play if they have some studio experience, or if they have something that, you don't necessarily have to have the studio experience, but you would have something that is you can't replicate, right? And then you bring that said person in and you wait it out to get that specific thing. There's no, you don't have to get a degree to be a session player. So, but mostly, the studio players usually have done their 10,000 hours. They know how to get the sounds. They know how to, to listen, to be in a room, to hear ideas that are both spoken and unspoken. But I have heard from some disgruntled touring musicians who are, some of these bands are great touring musicians, but that's not their area of expertise. Just like an accomplished studio player is not going to be the most exciting to watch up on a stage, right? There's a lot of different ways to do music. But a lot of times you'll hear a part on a record. I'm sure all of you have heard this before. You hear a part, I'll just use me for example, right? Take some of the 80s stuff that I was doing, that like that chorusy type junk, swing, ding, all that kind of stuff. You could play that when you're 10 years old for the most part. It's not like I'm doing stuff that name Joe Satriani's doing. I mean, it's not like you need videos, instructional videos to see how I was doing that. You could figure it out. Okay, that's true in the argument for some of these, I'm just going to say like a touring guitar player. They would say, well, I can play that. Why didn't you use me on it? Here's the big answer, and see if I can say this in a way that really, I can make it understood. You may go into the studio, and I may have said this on another episode, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it bears repeating. Going on Monday, let's say. Monday I play something great. The artist, producer, stand up. That's it, man. Wow, that's great, phenomenal. That informs the rest of the day. I'm kind of on a high, and I kind of have a bead on what they like, and I'm pleasing. I'm watching them, and yep, there it goes. That works great, man. Wow. Tuesday morning, I'm in with another artist, another producer, another engineer, and I'm riding high on that. Right. I go right back to that same bag of tricks, and I'm playing it, and nobody's looking at me, nobody's high-fiving, nobody's smiling. It's like, what the heck's up? Well, somebody at some point says, yeah, what else you got? Ooh, right there. There's the first arrow in, right? Oh, you didn't like that. Well, it worked yesterday. I'm a little bruised here. Okay, here's my second idea. You hope it hits, for the obvious reason, right? I mean, we all have only so many ideas. Well, if you've had a lot of experience in these situations as a studio player, hopefully you have more than 2, 3, 4 ideas, 5 maybe. But as time is ticking and somebody goes, nah, what else you got? You're starting to sink in your chair, you know, and so that's the point. It's like some of these things that you're hearing when you're a studio player, they're paying you the money to make them happy. You can draw the comparisons with the other kind of work. I'm not going to go into that. You're being paid. So the answer is yes, always yes. And so that's kind of that's the difference between like if I hire a studio musician, I'm hiring somebody not just for one idea. I'm hiring in case whatever they're doing is not working. I need more, and if I don't have the idea, I need other people's ideas. So it's like this gene pool of people that have kind of been curious in the same way I have. They've studied this, they can do this, a little bit of everything. And somewhere in all of that soup, you're going to find the answer for the day, for the song. So that's one of the main things when I hire a band. I'm looking for people of that ilk, we should say. I don't necessarily need, you know, the Hall of Fame guys. As a matter of fact, sometimes it sounds better when you don't have people in that competition who can outbest the best, right? I need a band is what I need. And also conflict resolution. You know, I mean, relationships are hard, right? We all come from families or friendships. You're going to run across situations where it doesn't gel. And that's no excuse when time is ticking in a recording studio. It doesn't matter. Ego's got to be left at the door. And I need people around me. I hire people specifically. I'll watch them. I want them to know how to get along with the artist, or if record label people come in, where they're not just cowering and leaving. I want people that can relate to people. Also people that are going to be sensitive to me. When I walk in a room, I don't have to bang my hand and say, come on guys, I need you to, they're reading me too. So it's people that are aware of the whole room. Themselves, me, the artist. Enough said on that subject. I'll go to my notes, see what I just got off that track there, or went down that rabbit hole.
One thing I was going to ask, whenever you're hiring a band, just because it's kind of related, is there typically, because you're behind the glass, you're on the other side of the glass, is there typically a band leader out there amongst, you know, all the musicians? There's one guy who is kind of not running the show, but...
Yes. Well, yes. Traditionally, that was always the way it was done, and then they would be paid a little more money. They would write the charts, all those kind of things. Everybody writes the charts. I don't distinctively say this is the band leader for the day. That's not what I do. But it's neither here nor there. It's not right or wrong. There are some times when I would notice like an artist, going back to what I was saying, if they have somebody that they feel most comfortable with in a dialogue, you know, like sometimes there was a record that I did with an artist, and we had to. It was interesting. This artist's music was predicated on the way the artist played acoustic guitar, although the artist was not, didn't feel confident enough to do it in the studio. But the music that he wrote, and I'll get into this when I bring some of these guitar players in, but suffice it to say, we had to find somebody that knew how to play acoustic guitar that didn't replicate exactly technically how he played, but the spirit of what he did. And that was hard. And sometimes the acoustic guitar player, again, all these guys that I'm talking about, they know exactly what this is, and I'll use this for some conversations with them. Sometimes there was an acoustic guitar player I had as one of the greatest in this country, but it was almost as if he was too good to play, and I needed somebody that wasn't coming and going this direction. I need somebody that was going this direction. We found that player, and it wasn't a guy that even plays acoustic guitar really. So, but my point is that the music of this artist emanates from an acoustic guitar. So I was more centered on the dialogue between that artist and the guy that we found to play this acoustic guitar part, because that was the core of what we were doing. So leader of sorts, yes. I mean, I like everybody to feel like they got skin in the game. So I don't just say, you have to speak with him before you speak to me, before I speak to the artist. We're all talking together. Yeah. But that's a good point. So you can see, I think I've exhausted the subject. There is no one way to do this. And it's, for me, it's all connected to this collaboration, this huge collaboration that we're doing that nobody knows the outcome. We're pretty sure, because I'm hiring players who have repeatedly shown me that we will get to the finish line. I'm going to help them get to the finish line. They're going to help me. In lieu, if I don't have an idea, I'll just shut up for long enough and hear people jam, and I'm going to hear something. They also trust me as the record producer to at least give them a direction, so they're not just floundering over here when what I'm really wanting is over here. So it's a relationship. That's, for me, I would say that's one of the most important things I think I do, because I get to produce a lot of different kind of music and different kind of artists. It really serves that, because an artist over here is not saying, hey, you just copy the same shit that you did on my record. Sometimes that happens, but that's if you use different players, you're automatically going to get another shade. Anyway, are we cool battery-wise and everything?
Oh, yeah.
Keep going? Okay, so studios. And I was going to say this. We happen to be in Nashville, Tennessee. This is Blackbird Studio F. I can't tell you how many records I've mixed actually here with, mostly with Justin Niebank. I'm going to get him on too, one of the premier mixing engineers, recording engineers in Nashville. This actually used to be an SSL board that took pretty much from wall to wall here. They finally took it out because we would come here with our Pro Tools and only run it through 2 channels. So they got this, whatever this is. I don't know what this is. Is it kind of an SSL? Anyway, shows you what I know. But I've spent a lot of time listening. Usually I sit in these back chairs. This is the best spot if you want to film it at some point. Sitting in that chair by the door is where I hear mixes the best. Blackbird Studios, it's owned by John McBride. His wife is a well-known singer, Martina McBride, who happen to be close friends, dear friends of Sharon and me. I watched their kids grow up, and they watched ours too. And I called John and I said, I can't keep shooting just at my house or at Robert's house. So got to, shake it up a little bit. He said, come on down to the studio. We'll find one. This is like a campus. This is Studio F. G-H, so how many of that? A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. At least 7, if not 8 studios here. It's like a city block here. Huge. I was tracking here all this week in another room, a tracking room, a big room. I love this. East of the Mississippi, this is, I can say without, and this is not me blowing smoke, this is one of the best studios east of the Mississippi in the country. John is one of those rare people who is just so taken up with sound. He spent years, he was Garth Brooks' sound engineer, then he ran the sound company that did all the equipment. He ends up, because he loves recording, he bought a small house here that had a board in it, and he just over years expanded it into a campus. He has a recording school here, the Blackbird Recording Academy. It sounds like an infomercial, but it just is that great. I love working at this studio because the personnel, number one, again, it's always about relationships. He does have one of the biggest microphone collections in the country too. He has, if somebody has one of a vintage mic, he has 5. He collects guitars, he collects drum kits. It's a musical place. This room is a mixed room, so it's kind of it's neutral. Most of the studio is very bohemian. He's a Beatle fanatic, and so everything is related to the Beatles. It's just a great place. If you get to Nashville and you can see it, I would recommend it. But I use this place as much as I can use it. And there are other studios in Nashville that we will shoot, but John was so kind to let me come here today, so thanks, John. Picking studios is a big thing, producer. Again, for me, my criterion is not being in a vibey place. I really don't care, because I'm just listening to music. So I can have lights up. It looked like closing time in a bar. I'm just as happy. artists, there are engineers that it's like they would bristle at that. They, you walk into their control room, the lights are like at dim. They say they can hear better. I'd take them at their word. Or, some artists like lava lamps here. They, whatever. Just stuff makes them feel like home. That's also why I record a lot at my home, because people like to come over there because they don't like to feel they're in a studio. The record company people can't come over to my house without being invited. So stuff like that. But when you're tracking, when you have in Nashville, we are still so fortunate because we do a lot of records where we still get a group of musicians on a floor at the initial onset of a record and collaborate and create tracks, as opposed to generating it all from a laptop, with samples and loops and all that kind of stuff. Not that we can, but this still, in essence, is a live music town. 1 second.
You shouldn't grab it. I should zoom.
Yeah, just zoom in every time. Oh, that was a good cup of coffee. Don't edit this out, please don't. This got to stay. So yeah, but studios, again, another subjective thing. I've been in situations with artists. This is one of the greatest, most perfectly staffed studio. It's pristine. And I've had artists say, I don't want that. I want it to feel like we're, going commando. I want it to be like a recording in somebody's barn or remote in somebody's house. And it's all valid. There are certain payoffs you get for that because the vibe is gonna be such that you may create an environment where people aren't thinking in the terms of the studio costs money. It makes them more comfortable. But at that point, sometimes maybe the equipment or the staff aren't quite up to the level like a major recording studio like this is. Does it matter ultimately? No. What ultimately matters are the songs and the performances. So there's a vast range. The engineers, another massive casting component. Great recording engineers. There's a whole subset of people that spent their whole life in audio, in coming up through recording in recording studios. Usually they start as being assistant to an assistant. The producer or the artist needs a cup of coffee. They're runners. They do that kind of go get lunch. But they're always looking at what the engineer, the recording engineer, the mixing engineer is doing. And by osmosis, you learn the room. Again, the same thing. It's like as players, we play demos. That was the great thing about at least the era that I got to come up with, because at that point there were no laptops. People couldn't sit home and construct these records that they're doing nowadays. Some of them are insanely great, but one person can do it. Back in that day, we didn't have that. We didn't have drum machines. We didn't have drum machines, so you had to rely on communication and other people. That's a good thing. I mean, it's why I still work, because I think some of these young artists that I work with, they have all the capacity for this other stuff that I'm not that good at, but they want to touch somebody, that's touched that other era. And great recording engineers are becoming a little far in between these days, because we all are engineers to a degree. I can record stuff at home, I just get samples and there's your drum sound. You don't have to worry about miking and all that kind of stuff. There's a real art to that. I look for engineers who, number one, know how to be absolutely invisible in a room. They can read the room. They can see, hear, feel the momentum of where the song, the artist, the producer, the musicians are doing, and they're not going to sit and get precious about all their gear and their EQing. They know when to fiddle with that stuff, and they know when to cut bait and move on. 2 more tweaks at 6K on a snare, or the momentum and the take is there, and they just say, I'll fix it in the mix, or I'll do it later, or it doesn't matter. I like those kind of engineers. Because again, it's all about the music. It's not about their one area of expertise. And I think that's my overriding theme. Has to be that from the producer, the musicians, engineers. Recording engineers, that's an art to find somebody who can take descriptions and immediately with a musician, change miking techniques, EQs, compression, all of that stuff. And all of a sudden, the thing that wasn't motivating the artist or the producer, all of a sudden I'm going, oh, that's it. That's what I was wanting. I'm not great with drum sounds, but I can kind of grunt to the engineers that I work with. It's not like that. Make it more like, I'm looking up a record, like this. Can you do that? Yeah, we can do that. That's the recording side. Usually you're going to have somebody that's running, well, in this case, running Pro Tools. Somebody that, again, they understand how to, a momentum in a room. I mean, if it's down and nobody's coming up with anything that's productive, well, then you have time to move around. You know, go. If you got to pee, you got to pee. You want a cup of coffee, make a phone call. But if something's happening of significance, all that stuff has to come secondary. And so the engineering staff, they are the ones who are pulling this all together. But it's not about them. Then you get into mixing, and that's again another level. Somebody who at the end of the day can take everything that the artist, I should put the artist before me at that point, but the artist, me, we've signed off. I'm making my little rough mixes at my house in my studio where I can hear things. I'm sending them to them. Usually they're on the road. Does this feel like a good Polaroid? Are we done? You feel like we've brought out what you've dreamed this song to be like. If it's yes, good, great. I send it to the mix engineer at this point, and he inherits my little rough, we'll call it a rough mix, right? And my expectation is that I don't want that reinvented. I want, again, it's always listening. I want him, the mix engineer, to listen to what I have. Not just listen, but feel what I'm projecting with my rough mix, and then expand that, make it better. And also don't be an egotist. Like, if you can't make it better, then don't do anything. Right? Ego is our friend because it makes us hungry and strong and say, yes, we can do it. But ego also can ruin music because it's like we need to feel important. We need people to pat us on the back and tell us that we're really important. The thing I'm trying to say to you is, as a producer, when I have this position, right? I want people to feel important, knowing they don't have to be important. Sometimes, well, I said it, you get what I'm saying. There's a teamwork that's so essential in all of this stuff. And that's the overview of my that's a 30,000 view of production. And basically what it doesn't entail is all of the highs and lows that we come up with. You know, I mean, and we can get into this later. I mean, I'm probably exhausted this subject enough for any of you to formulate your own questions. But you know, usually when people want to come in to the studio, they usually, if I have a friend, a kid of some friend of mine, I'll ask an artist, do you mind if somebody comes in? And if they say no, I usually tell that person, best thing you can do is just sit silently by a wall in the back room, because what you can pick up in 10 minutes of just listening and watching people interact is more the essence than anything you would get. I'm not saying schools are not important, but you can't replicate that. It's just like going from a college football player, you hear these guys say the speed of the game in the pros. You can't replicate it until you're there. Same thing in recording. Something can look so simple until, boom, it's not. And what they're asking, what they're paying for, is somebody in the production realm, just fix it. We don't know what to tell you. You'd be surprised at how many people in the record business, record companies, a lot of them they haven't even been in the recording studios. They don't even know how the sausage is made, basically. So, but that's not their area of expertise. They bank on producers. You know, I keep pointing to myself. I'm just one of many. But basically, what they're saying is make this great. We don't know how to tell you. Also, keep it within budget. You got to do that too. I mean, it's just so there is pressure. I'm not a martyr about this. It can be extremely easy on some days, and it can be mind-baffling hard and just take it out of you. You know, I mean, it's like I've left the studio as a producer absolutely defeated, thinking I'll never make it. You know, and then only to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning from a sleep and realize, oh, I should have said that. I should have asked that question. I could have done this. Go back in the next day and just fix it. That's kind of it. I'm going to look at my, Robert, if you got anything, I'm just making sure I've covered everything I want to say.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's interesting how much psychology is involved with producing. I mean, just hearing what you're talking about, like you're reading body languages, you're paying attention to a lot of things that aren't being said. Yeah,
I mean, I learned that as being an artist. I had a manager that was great. He told me, he said, don't listen to what like the promo people are saying. Listen to the silences, because nobody wants to give you bad news. And if they're quiet, that means, you know, if something's just happening, everybody's just blabbing about it because it's happening. It doesn't take anything at that point. When something is not happening, we all get, oh God, how are we gonna solve this? That's when you pull on your big boy pants and you dig into that. And like I said, I had so many examples. You know, I'm not going to name the names. You guys can look up if you want to see people I've played for, because it just feels like I'm just name dropping. But I got to see that and absorb. And that's really what it's about. You know, as a player studio, if you're interested in playing studio, it's the same thing. It's just a different part of the room. But yes, it can be extremely, it's not like you're playing pseudo psychology with people. It's really about listening. And I mean listening. I played my last anecdote, right? Unless you come up with another question. I played a session for somebody the other day, and I love this. I played a session, and they asked me to do a solo. Well, a lot of people have been asking me to do this 80s stuff again. You know, it's like, okay, well, cool. And the track was rocking, so I played this. It was pseudo blistering, right? It wasn't Andy Wood blistering, I can say that much. I'm still getting over the aftershock of playing before Andy Wood and with all those other guys. You guys know Andy Wood played rhythm guitar for me, by the way. Does anybody not shocked by that like I am? I saw something shiny, had to go with it.
He was excited about it too.
He was.
He loved it.
Oh, geez. That felt wrong, but I was really excited. Okay, I just totally forgot. I saw something shiny, went with it. We were talking, oh no, my little experience. So anyways, with young artists, again, no names right now until I clear at some point. As I played this solo and I went in the lounge, and this is me, you know, at this age, having produced a long time. So I just naturally, I'm not like trying to read body language, I just see it. And this young artist who really wanted me on these sessions, he was clenched, and it was like, I said, hey, how's it going? You cool with that? And the first thing, it was like this. And of course, right then, if I was young, I may have missed that. What that little hitch, that little reservation, I just said, you hate this. You hate what I just did. And he was like, no. I said, yeah, you do. Yeah, it's because if you loved it, you would say it's fantastic. That's studio playing, that's producing. You have to be willing to go, you hate it. What is it that you want? And if they can't tell you, then hey, let's go back in this room. That's what we did, by the way, on this little session that I took. Actually, it wasn't a little session, it was a good session. It was a session I took, because I don't do many sessions, but I just said, let's go in the room. I wasn't the producer. A good friend of mine was producing it, and he's very good. And the artist, and we just said, what is it you want? And the three of us just started saying, is it this? No, it's not that. This? Yeah, kind of maybe. And all of a sudden, I can't remember who said it. I don't think it was my idea. I think it was the producer. Said, why don't you do it? Make it more like a cowboy thing. Ooh. We all have different ideas of what cowboy means, but that was enough. We went there, and we came out, and as far as I know, the solo is still on there. I mean, who knows? Maybe use somebody else to replace me, but that's it. I mean, it's really complex when it's complex, and it's really simple when it's simple. And you can't go and get a degree and all of a sudden you're a producer. It's weird. It's like chicken and egg. You have to have hits for people to want you to be a producer. But how do you get a hits unless you're a producer? You know, so that's really I can't explain that. I have no answer for that. But this is my take on what I do, and I hope that you know, in the midst of my info commercials about my swag, that you learn something. And if you have questions, if I'm missing the mark, let me know, and we'll come back and continue these conversations and play some more guitar. Till then, adios.